Hi, I'm Eddie Sell, Southern Director with the California State Firefighters Association. Aside from being a director for CSFA, which is the oldest firefighter trade association in the state of California, I'm also a battalion chief with the Long Beach Fire Department. And my fire service career started 30 years ago as a volunteer firefighter. So leadership and mentorship has been very important throughout my career. And one of the things with CSFA in our video series that we want to do is highlight those things. So for our very first leadership and mentorship video, we have Executive Director Jeff Meston with us today.
Hi, Eddie. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Jeff?
Doing great. Thank you.
So this was challenging for both of us to even be here today, just due to the fact that we're currently in a pretty hectic fire season already in California. So I'm glad that Jeff was able to make it down to Southern California and see him live and in living color. So thanks for being here, Jeff.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
So what our goal in the Leadership and Mentorship series is to basically introduce you to different fire service leaders and leaders in general, and that might be in the business circles, community leaders, etc., that our members can gain a lot of insight and a lot of good knowledge and takeaways from their respective backgrounds and careers. So that's our hope. I continue to be a student of the fire service myself. I mentor people and feel that it's one of the biggest things that we can do is to give back and make sure that we're reaching back to those folks that are coming up behind us. And I know that Jeff has become a mentor for me personally. I talk to him all the time. And if I have any issues, whether it's with CSFA or fire service related, I can go to him as a mentor because he's been there. So we wanted to start off with a quick introduction about your fire service background, Jeff.
Great. Well, I started my career back in 1976 as a volunteer firefighter and have progressed through all the different ranks and several agencies. I worked for the Alameda County Fire Department as a volunteer, Madera City Fire Department, Novato Fire Protection District, South Lake Tahoe Fire, and I also am doing some work with California Office of Emergency Services currently. So yes, I have a fairly long career and a variety of roles that I've played. So I'm more than happy to share some of my thoughts with you. I was very fortunate to have had some incredible mentors during my time, and I think it's all about giving back. Alan Brunacini really played a significant role in my career, and we lost him several years ago, and I'm still very sad about that. Ronnie Coleman in the state of California played a pretty significant role, as did Jim Murtaugh, who was a FDNY deputy fire chief. Those three individuals really molded me into the individual I am today. And if I learned anything, it's you always have to give back, and that's what this is all about.
Very good. And so with that, why don't we kind of dive into one of your first lessons in leadership in your fire service career?
Well, you know, when I think about leadership as a whole, it is really all about people. And it's all about relationships with people, whether it's with your union, whether it's with the citizens that you serve, whether it's with your staff, whether it's with your engine company, your battalion, you name it. So it's really a people skills as far as I'm concerned. It always comes down to the relationships you form and what you can accomplish out of that. So I always try to remember that we only serve one purpose, and that's to serve the communities that we are employed by. Ultimately, oftentimes, at least in the state of California, with our mutual aid system, we go out and help others throughout the state. But the bottom line is, we have an allegiance to our communities, and we must always remember that that's the reason we exist. So anything that we can do to make their lives better, it's pretty cliche, but the bottom line is that we usually meet people when they're having the worst day of their life, and our job is to make it better. So I always relate it back to people skills and our ability to have a common focus, and the common focus is the service that we provide.
As a young firefighter coming up, what's a moment or a circumstance that you can look back on when that light bulb came off and you looked at somebody as somebody that you wanted to emulate as a leader or mentor?
Well, that's something that we all search for, is we look for the good in the people that we work with. My first captain was a fellow by the name of Al Mayorga, and he was the kind of leader that didn't have to yell at you. He was the kind of leader that you could look at and you knew if you did something wrong and you disappointed him. And I really wanted to be a good firefighter for him because I never wanted to disappoint him. So that was a leadership style that I learned pretty early on. And I still think it's very, very effective today. So when I think back to the earliest days as a probationary firefighter coming into a new community, I never wanted to let my captain down. And that's kind of the first leadership lesson that I received, being an employed firefighter.
Perfect segue into leadership styles. So the fire service, as you know, draws parallels very similar to the military as far as leadership styles that have been around for many centuries. And so if you have to think about your personal leadership styles, or now that you've had the opportunity to rise through the ranks and reflect back on what you view leadership styles, which ones are important for today's firefighter and ultimately for folks that are going through the promotional process?
Well, I think that if you focus on one leadership style, you probably won't be successful because we are dealing with a whole generation of people within the fire service itself, whether they're brand new employees or veterans. And then also the fact that when we deal with our communities, we're dealing with the very, very young and the very, very old and someplace in between. So I believe that you really have to have an adaptable leadership style. My father was a firefighter, as was his father. So I grew up in a semi-military fire service background. My dad was in the fire service when I was 5 years old. So the bottom line is he worked for a metropolitan fire department, very old school, very militaristic. He came from the Marine Corps. And the bottom line is I learned as a child that you had some very tight parameters on what was acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior. I also learned pretty quickly that when I started my first paid career, it was a pretty laissez-faire scenario where things were pretty casual until it was go time. When the alarm sounded, then we altered to a whole different level, and it was yes sir, no sir, yes captain, no sir. That's the kind of stuff that we ended up doing. As I've worked my way through the ranks, I realized that everybody's individualistic and you have to adapt accordingly. But I think if you always look at the mission, to protect and serve whatever it may be that your individual fire department has come to, I think that's really the bottom line that we have to focus on. So I believe that there's a variety of leadership styles and functions out there, but you have to use the one that works for the person that you're dealing with. Really that simple.
So since we're in the midst of this year's wildland fire season, we've also been dealing with COVID.
Yes.
And that's changed the game, right? As we know, with everything that we're doing out there. What would you say to leaders right now in the fire service that they should be aware of, or maybe how to deal with some of these challenges that they continue to be faced with?
Well, I think, first of all, we're in the public eye and people are paying attention to us. So, and I'll use the COVID as an example. If you're out and about without any mask on, people are paying attention to that. And let's face it, in the state of California, it's required. It's a law to have a mask on. So people are quick to point out when they look at their public safety officials if they're not wearing masks. And that's a big issue in itself. So again, we can't be above the law. We must follow the law. I think that's critical. And the bottom line is it's a confusing time right now. People don't know what to expect. Some are taking it very lackadaisical as their approach to it, but it's a serious event right now. People are dying because of COVID. So, I would just suggest that we're in the public eye. We have to set a good example. We go out there and deal on medical emergencies on a pretty regular basis, and you never know who has it and who doesn't. So caution is important. Not only do we owe it to our brothers and sisters that we work with on a regular basis, but we also owe it to our family and friends when we go home because we're not immune from that. So that's kind of how I look at the COVID scenario right now. I play an interesting role at the state working with Cal OES on COVID, and I match those numbers very closely, and I report that out statewide on a pretty regular basis. So it's foremost in my mind. And when you look around, we are changing our society. We're used to hugging people, shaking hands, having close interpersonal contact. And right now, that's no longer allowed. It's a challenge for all of us. And I know that we work very closely in our fire stations and our fire apparatus with our colleagues, and they become family members. But the bottom line is, we can't let our guard down.
No, very true. So why don't we talk about one of the things that you and I, again, we share a mutual passion for mentoring others. And that starts with our association with CSFA. So why don't we tell the members a little bit about what we're going to be doing with our mentorship and leadership program? That you've been a big part of the development of that, and you've taken your decades in the fire service and now are applying that to what we're going to do with CSFA, and ultimately that's going to help, obviously, our executive leadership, committee members, and then members at large. So let's talk about that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the things that I determined is looking at the role of executive director is what could I do to give back and help enhance people. When we think about an organization like CSFA, it's generally all volunteer. People go out of their way with time and effort to be able to put into the process. And oftentimes people do that because they have leadership roles and they have the ability really to learn and to gain from that and to be able to give back to their own individual fire departments. So I thought a mentorship program might be an appropriate way to do that. And what I have envisioned right now is, again, based on the approval of the board of directors, that we would have a formalized mentorship program would be available for our directors, for our committee chairs, and for people that would like to be in those roles. And we would have monthly lessons. We would have leadership discussions about that. We would utilize some of our existing directors to be able to reinforce those, so that not only would you be serving the state of California State Firefighters Association, but you would also be able to gain knowledge, skills, and abilities that would help you in your personal life and in your professional life. So I would envision that we would have a task book, and it would be a mini training program. We would talk about budgets. We would talk about politics. We would talk about political acumen. We would look at some of the key factors that are needed when you're trying to lead an organization.
And what's exciting is we're going to have these things once all the curriculum is done. We'll provide this as well to our membership. And those are things that for fire departments out there that might not have good reference material or templates, these are guides that those of you out there that are trying to promote and be leaders in your respective organizations can do as well. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be a really good program. And as folks decide to promote, they're always looking for different content, and this is going to be a place where you can go for some of that leadership content. So to wrap it up, how about some advice to our members out there that are listening to this, our very first leadership and mentorship video? Some advice just kind of moving forward.
Well, I think a couple things. One is it's always about people. Whether we serve, whether we coworkers, it's always about people. I think that's number one. Number two, I think you ought to treat people nice. If I learned anything from Alan Bernstein, I learned that be nice really goes a long, long ways. And then ultimately, I would say look for opportunities to serve, because we go out and we interact with the community on a pretty regular basis. And we ought to be thinking about what we can do to enhance that level of service. And I'll give you a little story that I was pretty proud of when I worked for the city of South Lake Tahoe. We had a frequent flyer, a person that we went to on a regular basis. And what happened is this elderly individual would fall out of bed. And as we looked at our statistics, we saw that we went out there at least once a week. And generally it happened in the middle of the night. Usually people don't fall out of bed during the daytime. So they went out of there in the middle of the night. And one of the things that I always try to do is empower our personnel to be able to do what they needed to do without direction. If it's on your organizational level, do it. So the company went out there and they wondered, why does this individual keep falling out of bed? So they went back the next day. They worked a 48-hour shift. They worked back the next day, and they determined that the lady had a bed that was faulty and broken. So once they figured that out, they went in there, they repaired the bed, they repaired the bed frame, all on their own. They didn't ask anybody's permission. They might have told their battalion, I'm not quite certain. And guess what? The lady never fell out of bed again because the bed frame was fixed. And that's the bottom line. That's why we're out, is to do public service. So I think that's a great example of being nice and doing the right things. And frankly, that can be done at the lowest levels within the organization. So if I have any leadership advice, it's be nice, be safe, be smart.
Great advice. We really appreciate your time today, Jeff. We appreciate all your decades of service to the citizens of California and everything that you do for the CSFA moving forward. We appreciate your time today. Thank you very much, and we will see you guys on the next Leadership and Mentorship video.
Thank you.